Hello, hello, and welcome to RachAquarelle. I'm back with my holiday art series where I am doing a holiday or Christmas or winter themed project each day, every day, between Thanksgiving and Christmas Day. So today I have a really simple and fun project for you. I'm going to be making some gift tags, and these are going to be super easy and fun. And for gift tags, it doesn't really matter what size they are. Mine are a little bit more on the large size just because of the specific projects that I'm doing. So what I recommend is kind of just figuring out what size you need. I think, let's see, I'm trying to remember. I think that these are like maybe 2.5 or 3 inches wide and then probably at least 6 inches tall. So they are a little bit large, and they're very wide too. And then I just used a hole punch to punch a hole in the top so I can tie them to a gift, and I just trace those onto my sketchbook paper so that I can create designs that will fit onto those tags, and then I will use my transfer paper to transfer the designs over to my tags, which for this project, I am going to be painting on cardstock paper. This isn't something I typically paint on, but I'm going to be using gouache. So it's a little bit different than what I typically do. I'm going to keep these designs fairly simple because what I'm going to do is use masking fluid to mask out these shapes. And then I'm just going to be able to use my gouache to basically just apply a wash over the entire tag. And what we'll get is a very simple but effective design. So I have kind of a winter scene with some stars in the sky and some trees. And then I have Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer. And now I have my tags and I'm going to just tape them in place. I want them to be as close as possible to being like directly under the designs. It's a little bit tricky. So, just kind of go easy on yourself. It may not end up perfect. But I just don't want those tags to shift at all while I am transferring them. And I have to tape them up toward the top of the tag so that it's a little bit easier for me to slip the transfer paper underneath. So the transfer paper needs to go in between the sketchbook paper and the tags. And now what I'm doing is just using my pencil to apply pressure so that the carbon on the transfer paper transfers down onto my cardstock. And I'm starting to realize that when I transfer directly from my sketchbook, that the softness created by the stack of paper on the sketchbook makes it really hard to actually get enough pressure to transfer onto the paper. So that's why I kind of flipped up my sketchbook so that there's really just my surface underneath and not a whole bunch of paper because it was just way too soft and wasn't really transferring. Even doing that, my transfer lines are going to be very light, even though I felt like I was applying quite a bit of pressure. Transfer paper is really great, and I usually find that my lines, if anything, are too dark when I transfer, but for some reason, every time I use cardstock, I don't get such a dark line. All right, so now I'm going to be applying masking fluid. I'm going to start over here with Rudolph. I know that the masking fluid is going to be really thick on this one, so I'm going to start on it first because it'll take a while for it to dry since it's going to be so thick. The tool that I am using is, I can't ever remember exactly like the official name of it, but I do have it listed in the description of all of my videos. I have a link for all of my watercolor supplies. And this is some kind of, I think it's called like a ruling pen, but basically you dip it into your masking fluid. You can adjust the width of the line that you want to make. There's a little knob on the side of it. And it's really nice for creating really precise lines. You just have to dip it into your masking fluid to kind of refill it as you go. And I'm trying to give my Rudolph some eyelashes here, and I wasn't really sure how that was going to turn out, but spoiler alert, it turns out really cute. But I felt like that was maybe the trickiest part of this, was just kind of making those little squiggly lines that could represent eyelashes. And now that I have this whole thing outlined, I'm going to just fill in the entire center of the reindeer and the antlers and the nose, everything. And then I'm going to add some circles out here, just kind of decorative. Maybe there's snow, I'm not really sure, but I felt like it needed a little something. And now I'm going to do the same on the other gift tag. I didn't sketch in the stars, so I'm just kind of winging that. That's easy enough. And I think the one thing I would change about this tag is that I would make the lines a lot thicker, because I didn't have enough contrast. So this cardstock is kind of like a medium gray, and I'm gonna go over this with a bunch of blue. Even though I'm going to use some dark blue and some light blue, I felt like there just wasn't enough contrast. So I wish that I had made all of these lines really thick, like these ones I'm doing right now. So I've adjusted the knob on this ruling pen so that I'd get a thicker line. Okay, guys, I waited for a really long time for both of these to dry completely, and you can still see if you look over on the Rudolph tag that the nose is still not dry, and I can tell because when it's dry, the masking fluid becomes pretty much transparent. And if you touch it, it feels a little bit tacky or sticky, but it won't come off on your finger if it is dry. And you do want to make sure that it's completely dry before you do anything. So for this tag, at first I'm just going to start out with some blue gouache and some white gouache, because my idea, since this is a night scene, there's stars in the sky, that it's going to be a darker blue up on top. And then as we get down closer to the snow, it's going to be a really light blue. But what I will end up doing is actually adding a little bit of even like black up onto the top of this tag to make it a little bit darker. And I'm glad that I ended up doing that, because as I said, I didn't mask off enough area to get a really, really good contrast with this. So that's as I said, the only thing I would really change about this tag. If those lines were a little bit thicker, we'd have a bit more contrast going for us. And so it's going to be kind of a gradient. I'm going to start out really dark at the top, and then I begin adding a little bit more white as I move down. And then when I get down into the snow, I'm just going to really go in with a lot of white, even though there's going to be blue on my bristles, so it won't be pure white. So we just go over the entire thing. And by the way, you can do this project very easily with watercolor. You just probably wouldn't want to use a cardstock, because the thing about gouache is you don't have to use quite as much water with it. So you can use thinner paper if you want. So you could do this project easily with watercolor paper and watercolors, exact same techniques. So you would still apply the masking fluid the same way, and then kind of just go over everything with a wash. Now you can see I'm just adding a little bit of black up to the top of the sky and trying to blend it down, even though my gouache is kind of dry at this point. And what I like about this is that you almost get kind of a stamped look. And so you definitely don't need this to be perfect. Okay, so my nose looks like it might still be a little bit wet. Sometimes you'll get kind of a hard film on top of the masking fluid, and then it'll still be soft underneath that surface. But I'm just going to be really careful and try to avoid touching the masking fluid with the brushes, or with my brush's bristles, so that I don't get any masking fluid onto the bristles of my brush. And I just added some red into the blue that was already on my palette to kind of make a reddish blue. And then I decided that it just wasn't quite dark enough, and so I'm glad I did this. I added just a little bit of black, and I'm just going over everything. And that's going to be pretty much it for the painting portion of this. We just need to wait for both tags to dry completely so that we can remove the masking fluid. And now I've waited. And what I realized about doing any kind of masking with gouache, I am one of those people where like different tactile sensations kind of bother me. And gouache is very different from watercolor. I love how it looks, but it kind of feels a little bit like chalky and dry. So yeah, I think next time I do because I think I'll do more tags like this with the masking fluid, but I will just do watercolor next time because it was so unpleasant for me to try to like touch the gouache in order to peel up the masking fluid. So I'm just going to speed up the rest of this because no one needs to watch every second of me peeling off the masking fluid. And you can definitely also tell that, even though this is cardstock paper, so it's thicker than, just like computer paper, it's still very, very thin. I think that's totally fine for gift tags. But I think, obviously your experience is going to be better with a watercolor paper, especially if you use 140-pound watercolor paper like I do. Just feels a lot nicer when you have to handle it, because with this I kept worrying about, crinkling it up as I was trying to remove all the masking fluid. So I like that design overall. The thing is that there's just not quite enough contrast for my liking, so I could have either used a lighter color of paper or white, or I could have applied the gouache a lot darker and I could have used thicker lines for the masking. All right, so it's a lot easier to take the masking fluid up off of the Rudolph because it can basically just kind of loosen up the ends and then pull off the masking fluid for the most part. And this one I like a lot better. I think this was really, really cute. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just a few minor touch-ups over on the Rudolph. One thing I planned to do all along was just to add a little bit of pure red onto the nose because, Rudolph had a very shiny red nose. But I'm just going to put a little dot in here. I'm not going to fill in that whole space. I'll leave a little bit of gap between the nose and the color of the paper. And this cardstock paper, it came in a pack of different colors. I really bought it because they have like a craft color for the paper. But I think, okay, so the one on the left, that paper was more of a gray color. And then this paper with the Rudolph was more of kind of a goldish color paper. So I actually think that that's really pretty. I don't know that I would have ever bought that paper just, for its own sake, but it's kind of interesting just to kind of use some things that I wouldn't normally use. So now I'm just going to kind of go over this and just add a little bit more of this dark paint. Totally not necessary, but I felt like I really wanted the nose to stand out a lot more. So that's why I decided to do this. But it's not going to be anything like a wash. It's going to be very uneven and kind of spotty. Lots of texture. And yeah, I really like how that turned out. So let's take a closer look up at the Rudolph, get that in focus. And I even actually wish that I would have left more imperfections in the masking fluid so that, you get more of that stamped look. And then this is the snowy tree, starry, something or other tag that I think I would like better if I had done it just a little bit differently. But yeah, this is a really easy and fun project to make your gifts even extra special. And I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you.